this week's Crew Justice Weekly Conversation hosted by Herman Lindsey, empowered by Witness the Innocent. Today we have a special show, and I'm so excited about this show because some of this history with this death penalty and the lynching is so amazing, and I never knew it was right here in my own backyard. So today we have a special guest. His name is Chris Mancini. I will let him tell you about himself and things like that. But I want everybody to pay attention to this because, and I challenge people to actually, after this show, to actually go in and look how bad was the sheriff in your county. So, Chris, can you introduce yourself to people?
I think the case people probably have heard me connected with the most was the Muslim ban, when Trump had Homeland Security stop and detain Muhammad Ali Jr. and his mother Khalila Ali. They were one of the first big test cases out of the Muslim ban. That was just 3 years ago. I've actually been practicing, a combination of criminal law, civil law, and doing civil rights. I'm sorry?
I think the case people probably have heard me connected with the most was the Muslim ban, when Trump...
We playing that back? Sorry, something wrong?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well anyways, so I started doing civil rights cases when I was chief of the United States Attorney's Office here in South Florida. And I worked for several administrations, and I saw the differences, especially during the Iran-Contra case when Reagan was in the White House. And we were dealing with aspects of that out of Miami because the weapons that were being sent down to the Contras were all coming from what we called Cockroach Corner, the portion of the Miami International Airport where most of the weapons and drug smuggling took place. So my involvement in these issues goes back quite a ways. And since I came from small town, upstate New York, and went through Marquette University on my way to Miami, I was one of these people that was culture shocked when they got to Miami, right when the Mariel boat lift hit. And I really couldn't believe all of the issues that Miami was facing at that time, and I should say all of South Florida. So since then, I've been writing about this, and I guess that's where we came into contact, Herman, when I asked you to take a look at this play that I've written called 3 Acts of Racial Terrorism. So I could go on and on about all this stuff, but what would you like me to focus on? About the play or about something else?
Chris, right now, like I say, I'm so stirred, because all this information is great. So what I want to ask is you to tell the people about the acts of your play.
Okay. Well, it's actually a trilogy. The first of the 3 plays is called 3 Acts of Racial Terrorism. The second play is called 3 Acts of Social Injustice. And the third play in the trilogy is called 3 Acts of Redemption. And the idea is to take people on a journey in a way most people aren't going to read about this. They're certainly never going to see it in the newspapers. They're not going to be taught it in the schools, but in a way where they can feel at a real visceral and emotional level how South Florida has always been the Deep South and has always suffered through segregation, through Jim Crow, through the Black Codes, and how South Florida, although it's thought of as this international suntan tourism destination, has a very dark past and a very dark current that runs through its criminal justice system up till today. And all the first play, as I said, is called 3 Acts of Racial Terrorism, and it's set in the 1930s in Broward County and in Miami, but it's primarily in Broward County. And then the next 2 plays take us back to Miami. Broward jumps scotch from there to Palm Beach. And then the last play talks about what do we do about this mess that we've created and that we usually ignore because we don't want to deal with it. We would rather give out this image that we're this fantastic tourism location and that everybody should come to Florida and everything here is just hunky-dory for the races, and the courts are good and everybody's good. We want to put out that false picture so that we keep bringing in that tourism money. That's kind of like the overview about the 3 plays in the trilogy.
I want to go, if you don't mind, I would like to go each section at a time.
Okay.
And the first one starts the play. Can you give me a little bit of background of each one? Like in 1933 it started,
right?
And then we had the little scoreboard. Can we go through each one, giving a little background and information about what happened and what this is
Sure.
about?
Okay, so 1930, the first play, 3 Acts of Racial Terrorism, is set in 3 consecutive years. 1933, which is the Little Scottsboro case. 1934, which is the case of Doc Williams, which is, you're going to play a big part in that, Herman. And then 1935, which is the lynching of Reuben Stacy by the sheriff of Broward County. A black man was lynched in 1935, the last man to be lynched in South Florida. So they're sequential because chronologically that's how they occurred, 33, 34, and 35. But the roots of what happened in 33 go back even further and start with our Bahamian migration program, where we were bringing Bahamians to South Florida to work in the fields. And so 1933, the Bahamians came over to the tune of 12,000 of them. And they actually started to outnumber the white people in South Florida. And the white people in South Florida started getting very nervous about the fact that there was more blacks than there were whites. And they were starting to think that if something happened, they could not control it. And then something did happen. For the first time in 1933, a robbery occurred, and a drugstore called Fox Drugstore was robbed by a black man with a gun. Now, looking at something like that today, it wouldn't even make the middle page of the local section of the newspaper. But back then, this was a small town, a series of actual small towns, Pompano, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, all these little towns that were connected together loosely. So when that robbery occurred, it was a big, big, big deal. And right on the heels of that robbery, a fish seller by the name of Robert Darcy got murdered, coming home with the day's receipts in his pockets. And the sheriff of Broward County, a gentleman, not really a gentleman, a racist through and through by the name of Walter Reed Clark, decided he was going to solve that crime in the usual way. And he sent his deputies into the black part of town called the Quarters, and they just rounded up a bunch of blacks and started beating them until somebody pointed the finger at somebody and somebody else pointed the finger at somebody. And through that process of torture and beating, the sheriff decided that these 4 guys had committed the murder. Now, you got to fast forward to 1936. This is 1933. But in 1936, the United States Supreme Court had never decreed that it was illegal to torture criminal defendants or criminal suspects. That had never been said. So up until then, it was perfectly legal. Now, supposedly, in the 1930s, they were starting to make inroads towards getting those cases thrown out. They called it the 3rd degree, when a sheriff would beat a confession out of people. So these 4 guys, the little Scottsboro boys, got arrested. And they were named the Little Scottsboro Boys because in Alabama, at the same time, there was the Scottsboro Boys case going on. Remember that? That was a huge case in the 1930s. These 2 women claimed that 9 black men had raped them on a train, and then they later recanted. But that was also a case involving torture and of confessions. So the Little Scottsboro Boy case is happening here in South Florida, while the Scottsboro case is happening in Alabama. And these two cases are starting to make national news. So because the pressure was on the sheriff of Broward County, he had promised everybody that he was going to set a new record and commit and hold 4 executions in our electric chair in one day. And at the same time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had just legalized drinking. Prohibition ended in March when he became the president. So everybody in South Florida, all the white people, were all excited. They were going to have a big beer and booze party and watch these 4 black men be executed. It was all the town. It was all the rage. And when the black men started to claim that they had been tortured, the courts put a stop to the execution. And once that happened, the sheriff of Broward County was in big trouble because he had promised these executions, and he was not able to deliver. That one event, which then the case, the little Scottsboro case, went on, wound its way through the courts for many more years, as I told you, till 1936. But that one event created so much enmity between the black community and the white community, so much distrust, so much anger, that the white community in Broward County vowed that someone was going to have to pay for the murder of Robert Darcy. Because to them, it looked like these 4 black boys, the little Scottsboro boys, were literally getting away with murder. Now you take that story, and the next thing that happens is Doc Williams gets arrested for raping a white woman, which he did not commit. And when I read that transcript, I realized that this story had been lost to history, that this was a fantastic story about how the system, the defense attorney, the judge, and the prosecutor back in the 1933s, the 3 of them combined and conspired to convict this man of a rape he did not commit. And he was executed without an appeal 20 days after he was convicted. So that's the second act of 3 acts of racial terrorism, the trial and the execution of Robert Darcy. But that was not enough for the people of South Florida. The white people, the white supremacists, the people that wanted to maintain the system of white supremacy, that wanted to keep those 12,000 Bahamians under control, that they were worried, might step out of line and take over the town. So that led to the next and the third and final act of racial terrorism, which was the lynching of Reuben Stacy. The sheriff of Broward County, the longest serving sheriff in the history of Broward County, Walter Clark, promised everyone that he would make up as best he could for the fact that the 4 Scottsboro boys had gotten away with murder. And the first black man he got his hands on that he felt he could justify the lynching of, that's exactly what he did. He and his brother Bob, who was the chief deputy, took Reuben Stacy out of the jail. They drove him over to the Old Davie water plant. The entire town showed up. 200 people were there. And they had themselves the party that they had been promised when the little Scottsboro boys were arrested, but they were never put to death. So they lynched Reuben, riddled his body with bullets that the sheriff's office had been issued as part of the sheriff's equipment. And then his body was summarily dumped. We don't know to this day where he's buried. So the story of the first 3 acts is really the story of white supremacy and how the people in South Florida were committed to keeping, especially the Bahamians, under control by any means necessary. And the idea that 200 people could show up at a lynching and not one person was identified as having been there. The state attorney was involved in the cover-up to his eyeballs. He impaneled the grand jury, and the testimony was that everyone who was there were wearing masks. Well, they had to drive their cars out there. They all had license plates on their cars. Everybody knew everybody who was at that lynching. But the state attorney engaged in the cover-up. The sheriff did the lynching, and shortly thereafter, the governor of the state of Florida wrote the state attorney a letter saying, we're going to have to show people that they don't have to resort to the lynch mob, that will take care of these cases in the justice system. And that was the type of justice that was meted out to Doc Williams in 1934. Then, of course, Reuben Stacy was lynched in 35. And then following Reuben Stacy's lynching, there was a whole series of executions that ran through the courts in days. Again, the idea was the governor was trying to exercise control over the population of South Florida, and he was pulling the levers of justice to do it. So when you look at what you just said, Herman, a few minutes ago about the Central Park Five, Donald Trump's involvement in all of that, you can take a pen and draw an unbroken line from the 1930s to 1989 with the Central Park Five. And you can take that pen and continue that chronology to today. And this is the essential problem in our court system. It's been riddled because it's been a slave to segregation, it's been a slave to the objectives of white supremacy, and it's been a slave blindly to the fact that in order to achieve those goals, it's taken the life and property of so many people who were never given any form of justice. Now, I can go on all day about this, Herman, but it's time for me to stop, right?
No, I mean, like I said, it's interesting. I'm gonna try to share a screen on something right here, Chris. This is something that
Yeah.
I actually got from you.
Yes.
Allison, can we see that good, or can you see that on the screen?
I can see it.
Okay, so this is the beginning of it that you actually started, and I'm looking at these pictures, and as we say, you know, we can relate to this. So I want to just make some comments on each year and bring it into modern right here. Actually, we take the 1933 police torture. In the modern day, we still have these same cases. These same cases, like you say, we have the Groveland Four, the Parkland Wars, and things like that. And a lot of the cases that has police torture in it, a lot of them don't get reversed because of the confession that was given. But in some case, it has surfaced that DNA has proven that the person didn't commit it, and it was a false confession in it, and that the police had beat or tortured or put the person through extensive interview to get this unlawful confession. Here in 1934, we have where Roy Williams, and you know, as is said in the play, you know, it's a part in that way. He was asked, was he guilty? And he was saying, no, he's not, but he would have to say he's guilty. And here it is in 1934, they execute this man, and he's claiming he's innocent. Back then, we didn't have the resources or the organizations we have now to help people such as himself, you know. But this is a prime example of, for instance, Florida having 29 death row exonerees. This is an example, Roy Williams is an example of those 29 death row exonerees that actually got off of death row. And I think we're at 170 in the nation, 180, and that's from 1976 on to the present day. Now we're gonna go to 1935. 1935. And I'm gonna quote this, and you can look it up in the Wikipedia. The Wikipedia states that in, one second. The first official criminal justice system was created by the British during the American Revolutions, as they created this system to primarily justify hangings to the citizens of their government. So that passage tells me that back then they put in a criminal justice system, not for justice, but to actually justify the wrongs that they are doing in these unlawful acts. So we know for a fact that from up to 1976, our great state has executed innocent people. They have executed innocent people. They have lynched innocent people. Now we go to the modern day where 1976 on to today, where we just had the Hearst case and the court ruled that the statute was unconstitutional. But they only allow people up to 2002, I think it's 2002, to actually file for resentencing. But if a statute is unconstitutional, that means it's unconstitutional from the time it was actually written. So that means from 76 to 2001, the ones that they have executed, they're executed unconstitutionally if they didn't have a unanimous jury verdict. So now we battling this, and this is why I love this show, because it brings out so much of why we should fight to abolish the death penalty, why we should be careful about the people we're voting, why we should step up as a whole, as people, and stand up in unity and stop this chaos. Because it says straight up in the Wikipedia that the justice system was designed to justify the hangings to their people of the community of their government. And that the system was adopted by America. And right now today in America, that's what we're actually living by. We see all these acts. I mean, when Chris first talked to me about this play, and he was telling me about the history of these things, it was blowing my mind. It was blowing my mind. And, you know, it's amazing to see how Broward County and operate most of this corruption was operated up under the very state attorney that we just got rid of. He's been here since 1972 or 73. And he's been a big part of this, Michael Sachs, big part of this. No officers has been challenged for something wrong they done did, and we have a police killing down here all the time that is not making the news. We have people getting beat up all the time. We got detectives doing what they want to do to pin a case. You know, it's a prime example. My case, Seth Penelope case. We have Freddie Pitts. You know, it's a lot of this going on down here, and it's very important. I mean, I couldn't think this was all in my backyard. I couldn't think this was all in my backyard. And the most craziest thing is that nobody challenges Broward County. Chris, if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask this, and I'm gonna ask that you tell me a little bit of your opinion, and this just is your opinion. Why do you think that Broward County is not being such challenged in such a way with all of these things going on? I mean, look at across the nation. They're challenging when they killed George Floyd. They're challenging in other states when the police are killing. But here in Broward County, we having police killing just about every week. Every week. And there's nothing being done.
Well, my opinion, without facts to back it up, really is of no interest to anybody. So let me tell you that I have done an extensive amount of research to reach the opinion that I'm about to give you. I've actually written a book about this, which I've not yet published. The research was based on what we call closeout memos that the state attorney in Broward, Mike Satz, that you just referenced, has been writing or have his assistants write ever since he's held office. The closeout memos are a undeniable firsthand from the mouth of the state attorney's office history of white supremacy, of favoritism towards police, of out and out racism towards the Black citizens of this county. You just have to read them. Now, I've gotten copies of them, and from them I've developed charts based upon the type of closeout memos. To reference your point, I think there have been 260 police shootings and killings since Sats took office. The only one that was prosecuted to any extent was the McBean case. And McBean was thrown out by one of our local judges, and the case against the police officer was upheld on the Stand Your Ground statute, which even the American Bar Association has written reports saying has been used as a tool to continue white supremacy and racism around the country. It's a great moment that when you read these closeout memos, the case that always comes to mind first in my mind is the Hedera brothers. They were unarmed and they were shot by Miramar police, one in the back as he ran, the other one in a car, because the police claimed that the driver, the brother that was behind the wheel, tried to run over a police officer. We'll never know. There were no body cams. But the other brother was shot in the back as he ran away. And the police justified it, saying, well, we didn't know if he was armed or not, and we didn't know what he was going to do, and so we had to stop him. These types of cases have gone to the grand jury, and Sats and his assistants have used the grand jury over and over again to exonerate these police officers. As you know, Herman, we have strong police unions. We have laws which favor the police in the state of Florida. Give them qualified immunity, give them an opportunity to look at the evidence before they have to make a statement, all kinds of protections that are not afforded to anyone else. This is the subject matter if Kamala Harris and Biden win the election, in which these instances where the rest of the country that you referenced a minute ago, Herman, has been rising up and protesting. This is the subject matter which belongs 100%, absolutely squarely in the Florida legislature. These are things that the Florida legislature has got to change because the local state attorneys can't do it on their own. And Sats is a good example from 46 years of being state attorney of what happens when you have an electorate like we do in Broward County, where only 10% of the electorate turns out to vote. And often only 2 to 3% of that is the Black community. And the result is there's no pressure on the state attorneys to look harder at the actions of the police, to take a look at it from a critical perspective rather than, well, whatever the officer says, we'll just rubber stamp it. And this has been the problem in Broward County for over 46 years.
We have a new state attorney prior now, and I'm not sure. Did we do the public defender race this year?
Yes, and Gordon Weeks won. Gordon Weeks, the number 2 guy from the public defender, took the number 1 slot in the primary.
Right. So I've met Gordon Weeks. And,
yes.
He's an outstanding guy.
Yeah, I think his heart's in the right place. I do.
So I think that now that we have Pryor and Gordon Weeks and to our justice system here in Broward, I think I'm looking forward to a little changing. I'm hoping.
Yeah, little. Little. We need big.
Well,
think
this
big.
is that, I've sat down and spoken with Gordon Weeks, and I shared some of his views with him. Like I say, he's an outstanding person. I haven't actually met Pryor yet, which hopefully I'll be able to meet him real soon. I'm gonna try to make that arrangement when he gets settled down into his office. But I do think that change is here, and that one of the reasons that we have the change is because the people in the community are stepping up. But one of the things that we need to continue to do, and to make this possible because this is just the beginning. So to make this possible, I think we're going to have to do a little more education in the communities of sharing like things such as this play as this history and understanding. You know, it's always been said before, you have to know where you came from to know who you are now. And all of that plays a part of where you came from. You know, Broward County, you know, it's a county. I mean, I've spoken all over the place. State of Florida, United States. I've been in Italy, Belgium, but you know, I don't come speaking in Broward County. Do not have much action going on down here in Broward County. But what I want you to do, if you may, Chris, is you have I had the privilege of coming to your little museum the other day. Consider it. Can you tell the people the name, the location, and what that educational museum is about?
Yeah, we're in Hollywood, right next to Dixie Highway Railroad tracks, right next to the Hollywood Boulevard, where all the restaurants and bars are. So we're in the downtown, smack dab in the downtown entertainment district. And the purpose of this museum is to put these plays. We ran a television show we're reshooting called From Crime to Crime on Channel 17, PBS. So we'll be launching new episodes. And I have a whole shelf of projects. They're all designed to do one thing, Herman, all designed to do one thing. Tell people the truth about where we've been and challenge them to ask themselves, is this what you want? Is this the type of criminal justice system you want? Or are you going to get up and are people going to, for a change in South Florida, pay attention to what's been going on here? We have been the center of deliberate indifference since the 1930s as a community. I could go on and on about that, but I know you want to hear about that. Let me just make two brief comments about what you said. If you read the papers, there's already pushback against Harold Pryor making changes. You've been reading what's going on with the unions and Jeff Bell. They're already pushing back against the idea that there's going to be change, the type of change that's necessary, like pattern and practices of the police, institutionalized checks and balances to look for racism in policing so that we have truly neutral policing. They're already pushing back. So as much as I hope and pray that Harold understands and has the guts to stand up to these people, I can tell you we're in for a fight. There are too many entrenched interests to change the system. Not enough people care. And that's why I wrote the play. And the second part of the play, the second play, and the third part about how to change all this. But my view of the future, maybe it's affected by the fact that I'm getting old, you know, and I've been doing this so long. My view of the future is hopeful, but I'm not that optimistic that just because we've elected a black sheriff and elected a black state attorney and elected, you know, Gordon Weeks, who is a good man, to this office, his office is public defender, that change can come from the top down. My belief, Herman, is that change has to come from the bottom up. The voters in this county have to demand it and force it on the police, on the politicians. And the only way they're going to do that is if they understand what you just said. You got to know where you've been to know where you're going. That's the purpose of this crime history that we operate in Hollywood. We tell the history of South Florida, crime history especially, but you can't tell crime history without telling economic history or anything else. I mean, we were We were the epicenter of prohibition, remember? We were the epicenter during the Depression. We were the epicenter of the cocaine business, the Ponzi scheme business, the on and on. Crime in Florida is intricately intertwined with our economy and tourism. So what we talk about here is how all those things fit together, how they work together to create the problem that we're in, the problems that we're in, the problems that we have, and what do we do to change it? I know how to change it. I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's just that people have to have the will to force the politicians and the police to bring these changes to bear. And so far, we don't. So my view of the future is a little less optimistic than yours.
Well, I think that I can agree with you on most of that aspect. But, you know, one thing I'm determined to do, and I don't break the standard of that, is the fact that education is
Yes.
a powerful tool.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, it's finding this information, because just like you were saying, it's already pushbacks. A lot of people in the community don't know about this pushback, you know. So, you know, doing shows like this here, Witness to Innocent, we try to get our education out there the most we can. And it's kind of difficult with this epidemic going on, but it's possible. So what I'm gathering from you, and I'm going to talk with my peers at Witness to Innocent, is that what is needed here for the change is the people in the community to stand up behind crime. So he'll have the power to stand up. So he'll have the tools he needs to stand up and make the changes that's necessary. So people have to get with Sheriff Gregory and, you know, give him the power, give him the support to bring these changes on, because it's going to be a fight that, you know, with this change of this good old boy system that was in place, newly changing, it's going to be a fight. So I think that what we may need to do is do a little bit more educational things around this very subject.
Yes.
Do a little bit more education. So I was going to ask you, you know, I'm the Secretary of Board of Witness to Innocent, and we have a staff board, and I'm sure our great Executive Director, Kurt Bloodworth, who was also exoneree, and our Chairman of the Board, Kawami, is watching, who's also exoneree. And one thing about it is we all fight with a passion. You know, you knock one down, you still fight the other one. So don't think you're gonna knock one down and then you just gonna be able to look at the other one. The other one's already gonna be on top of you. You know, we think a lot alike. So I was thinking, if an organization was to try to help change in this, what would be the suggested actions to take to help this change come about?
I've given this a tremendous amount of thought, really thought about this. Hell, there's some nights I don't sleep thinking about this. You're asking me for my take on this, and my take on this is very simple. We have to change the minds of the electorate. We have to get to the people that vote. We have to get to them directly with the truth. They have to become passionate about seeing this change. Then that has to be communicated to the newly elected officials to give them the mandate. The only way I know how to do that, Herman, in South Florida, is take this play, align people with it, and not just the play, but I'm just going to give you an example of how this could be done. For years, I've been reading the Sun Sentinel. Years, well, far back as I can remember, the Miami Herald. They have largely failed in their duty to the citizens of South Florida to highlight and bring home the necessary change. they never questioned SATs to any great degree for anything they've done. They'd write an article and then it would be forgotten. And all of these 260 killings, the people that have done more to highlight it than anybody I can think of in the press has been the New Times. And you know, I'm not pushing one publication over another. But when you take the approach that the New Times has taken, there is an overall cumulative effect on the reader. And the purpose of the play is to bring home an overall cumulative effect of the mistakes of the past and how we can change that going into the future. But to do that, Herman, we need the involvement of people like you, the passion that you bring. Because by and of itself, this is just a play. Those articles that were written in the Miami Herald that I'm criticizing, the Sun Sentinel that I'm criticizing, they were just an article. They drop and they're forgotten. So to really make the electorate sit up and pay notice, we have to create a critical mass of interest. I've built this structure of the play so that someone like you can take a part, not only do a great job of playing a role, but at the end of the play, get up and say, I was in death row. I can tell you from my experience how the system does not work. And I've got a list of clients and people that I've accumulated over the years that would go beyond that, give their personal testimonials about how the system has failed. And not to mention the families of all those people that were killed that have never seen justice. And that, I believe, is the only way this is going to create a critical mass. The newspapers won't do it. There is no other mechanism to get to the people in South Florida that I can think of. So I want to take the play. We're going to film it, parts of it in October. We're going to create a sizzle reel. And then I'm going to send it again to Robert Runcie, who did nothing with it the last time I gave it to him. Rosalind Osgood, who did nothing with it the last time I gave it to her. Dale Holness, who did nothing with it the time I gave it to him. Sheriff Scott Israel, who ignored it because they have no mandate to pay attention to it. And it's not because the play is the be all and the end all. It's the mechanism to open the discussion, to get people thinking about this. Because these are horrible things that have happened in South Florida's history. This is not sunshine and roses and suntan lotion. This is something that needs to be addressed, and people don't want to look at it unless you force them to. So the way I think of it is, here's the vehicle to do it. Get you involved, get other people involved, have them play a part, and then let's take it all over the county. Start with Broward, take it down to Miami, go wherever it needs to go, and enlist people in the idea that South Florida has a dark past and its future won't be better until they stop being indifferent and they pay attention and get engaged in the struggle.
I have a question. How can people give you support into making this play happen and getting it out there? Alice, like I said, I got a great staff. Allison, who's in the background, and Chloe's in the background. So I'm gonna ask them to take down the information or place the information in the comments. But is there any type of way that someone wanted to get involved with you on this play or support you in this play? Is there any way they can contact you or get
Sure.
What type of support or how can the community support you on this?
Listen, I'm an end results kind of guy, so I'll jump to the end result. There's a process that we're undergoing now to fundraise and do other things, but everybody's fundraising. My God, this is a time of COVID. Who's got money? You know, we're going to see this to the point where we create this sizzle reel. Once you see the reel, and it tells you the whole story, you know, short versions, cuts and pastes parts of the trial of Doc Williams, cuts and pastes a little bit of the lynching of Reuben Stacy, cuts and pastes a little bit of the little Scottsboro boys, but then tells the overarching story of what was going on. Once they see that, they call us up. They can find us on the web, Crime History Inc. You know, they can find me, just put Chris Mancini in Google, and I pop up with the Alis and all other kinds of things. You can find me, you can find crime history. Then I want them to take that sizzle reel to their organization and say, let's invite these people to put this play on. There are venues all over this town once COVID opens up. And if we can't get past the COVID problems, then we're going to film the entire play and send it out on a CD. Sooner or later, it will work its way into classrooms. It will work its way into community groups. It'll work its way into Kings Point. It'll work its way into Century Village. It'll work its way into the places where the traditional Democratic voters live. And they can sit down and they can watch it. And at the end of it, someone from Crime History, Inc., or someone like you, Herman, will get up on the stage and say, I'm Herman Lindsey. I spent 3 years on death row for a crime I did not commit, and I am here to tell you that we have to make a change in Broward County. The play tells you about the 30s. Let's talk about the 2000s. And that CD is our messenger for this purpose, our goodwill ambassador. And we're going to provide it to everybody for free. Anybody that wants it.
And I'll try to get the staff to put a link to your information on our website, witnessinnocent.org, if that's possible. But I want to go back. I want to go back to something I seen in your office, and I think it's very important. How you pronounce his name? Delavoy?
Delavoy, what name?
The first black
Oh,
officer.
Doc Williams? I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry.
the first black officer in Broward County.
Oh, yes. Well, the first sheriff was, I have a file on him. Yeah, it'll come to me in a second. Sorry.
I noticed when I was reading on the wall, he was the first black police in Broward County. They named the park after him. I forgot the first name, but it's Delavoy. All right. So, and back then, you were saying that black police officers was only allowed to arrest black people.
That's right.
Can you give people a little bit of history of that?
Sure. You know, in Miami, it's so interesting. We have preserved a absolute icon of the segregation at its worst. It's called the Negro Museum and the Negro Courthouse. And it sits down there. It has a courtroom built in it, along with a series of jail cells. And it was staffed by white officers in supervisory positions. And their job was to watch the black officers that were hired to make sure that they followed everything by the book, according to the Miami Police Department hierarchy, and that they did not arrest white people. So it was just, that's just a wonderful example of how we built physical structures. You know, it wasn't just coloreds only over a bathroom, a sign, or a pool that said whites only. We actually had physical structures that were only for blacks. Back starting in the 40s, 50s, 60s, during that time period following the war, when Liberty City was starting to expand. And of course, we built a wall around Liberty City to keep the blacks separate from the whites at Liberty Square. These are the physical remnants of the era of segregation that continues to this day. You can go and look at it, you can touch it. It's nowadays, by today's standards, it's almost unbelievable, but it makes perfect sense when you consider how South Florida was set up to create two separate systems of justice. One for the poor, which was primarily black, and one for people with money. And how it's been going on like that, it still goes on like that to today. Two separate and unequal systems of justice. That's what we have here in South Florida.
One thing I want to clarify to the viewers that we're not trying to bash the police department here. You know, we're just talking about facts and things that went on and is going on. And I want people to understand that I have encountered a lot of the Broward sheriff officers that, you know, are very respectful, you know, and they're trying to do something more than just take you to jail. You know, I done ran into some that just completely harassed me, you know, to an extent where the charges were brought against me. I was arrested, and they didn't even have the right probable cause to arrest me. So, you know, I've experienced both sides of the issue here, and to address the issue, it's like it's like you at the grocery store and you have to pick out a fresh apple. You know, you looking in all through all the apples, you know. But one thing you have to remember is that even when you're addressing the issue of picking out the right apple, when you're picking up a bad apple, you're not just throwing the apple down. You're actually picking the apple up with care to look at it to see whether it's good or whether it's bad. And that's how you need to handle the police right now. You have to handle them with respect and see how your situation go. You know, I call it dealing with the police is forgive me. It's like in a death penalty case, aggravators, mitigators. You know, aggravators is what aggravates the police to make them be worse, and mitigators is what it is to prevent them from being worse or taking you to jail. You know, one thing I learned is if the police is stopping me and I address them with how you doing today, sir? Can I ask what the problem is? You know, I get a better encounter with them than I would do. Man, why the hell you pulling me? What I did? Why you effing with me? You know, because then that's an aggravator. The first one is mitigated, the second one aggravated. And you know, Kristen dealt with the police many times, and he's not afraid of taking on cases with the police. And I've learned some knowledge from Chris. And one of the things that I want to say is that, you know, going through this hard time with all of this stuff is actually happened. It's going to take a community to come together to heal this matter. You know, if the community cannot come together and heal this matter, it shouldn't be the community come together when something happened in your family or to your friend. You know, it should be the community coming together all together at all times. And, you know, when I say community, I'm not saying just blacks. I'm saying the community, the people of society. We're not fighting for the justice with just blight. We're fighting for justice. So we want, when we say the people of the community, we want all the people of our community, that is what I speak about, to come together. And that's what it's going to take. We don't want them, we don't want to be divided and say, okay, the Blacks community is standing up, but the Latin community is not, or the white community is not. We need a mixture of everybody in there, because we don't want a law that will come in, or an elected official to favor this side and not this side, and be harsh on this side. So in order for it to become equal, we have to become one. We have to become one community, all races, all colors, all nations, you know, all religions. You know, we have to come one in community, and we have to go up to it with someone like Harold Park, and we have to let him know, hey, listen, you want to do the right thing? We standing here, we got your back. What do you need us to do? Do you need us to stand on the courthouse for you? Do you need us to talk in the media? Do you need us to spread the word? You know, we need to know what it is to give him support. With Sheriff Gregory, we need to know what it is that Broward Sheriff's officers need from us in the community to help them officers that is really trying to do justice in our community. Because one thing you have to understand, officers are part of our community. You take that uniform off of them, you know, they just like regular guys going fishing and hunting, and, you know, going out to the club or something like that, you know. But everybody have issues. Just because they're police officers don't mean they're perfect. They have a little authority, yes, and some of them abuse that authority. But it's measurements that you could take when they abuse those authority to help us also put this in correction. You can file with the attorney fair. Chris, you got any suggestion with people that's having a problem with the police? What should they do?
Well, let me say this about what you just said. I was a prosecutor. I spent 10 years with the U.S. Justice Department. I firmly believe that the agents that worked for me from the federal government, the police that came in, 99% of them followed the rules I set for them. The problem isn't the police. The problem is the courts, the judges, the way the laws are written in the legislature. This starts at the top. It doesn't, the number of police officers that walk out on the street every day and say, I'm going to get me a black guy today. They're there, but they're far, far, far outweighed by the police officers that are just following the rules as best they can. The problem is the rules. The way the courts have deliberately refused to look at racism as an element in search and seizure. They've said, we can't peer into the minds of the police, so therefore we're not going to try. That's a lie. That was a way for the courts to sidestep the issue. We look at the issue of mens rea or intent in all forms of crime. But we decided, not we, the courts, that we weren't going to do that when it came to the question of racism and white supremacy. That needs to change. And that needs to start at the top. And that is my big fear about Donald Trump packing the United States Supreme Court with white conservative justices. Because unless we begin to see more of diversity on the bench and more of an understanding through the Justice Department and through the attorney generals and through the state's attorneys, that the orders have to come down from them to the police as to what will and will not be tolerated on the streets. The officers are going to do what they're given the ability to do within the range or the looseness with the rules are enforced, depending upon the idiosyncrasies of the state's attorneys. So and Justice Department, US attorneys and attorney generals. So what I'm saying is we need legislation and we need the courts to stop playing these games. And I've watched them do this for years and years and years, sidestep what they needed to take on directly. So my advice to anybody that gets in trouble, think about what your rights are, and if you don't know them, call a lawyer. And every time one of these cases comes up that's coming into my office, we fought it tooth and nail. We've enlisted groups like Black Lives Matter. We have picketed down at the courthouse for individuals who were being railroaded through the system, and it works. It works, but it shouldn't have to be that way, Herman. The system needs to be systematically changed so that everybody gets the same opportunity, not just those individuals that get lucky and happen to find the right lawyer or find a group at Black Lives Matter that takes an interest in their case. The system needs to change from the top down. It's not hard. We know what to do, just has to be done.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time. I have an hour with Zoom. So, Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming. Is there anything you wanted to add before we come to a close?
Just look for the play. We'll be advertising it soon, starring Herman Lindsey. We'll be pushing it out there in all forms of social media. We'll be finishing the filming in October, and then we're going to start dropping it into the hands of all these politicians, and they're going to ignore it because that's what they do. But if people start calling us and saying, would you come and speak? Would you put the play on for us, either in the film version or the real live stage version? We want to hear about what happened and what we can do about it, where we are today and where we need to go. Then we can make things change in this county. Then we can make things change.
And I'm the star of Doc Williams.
Amen.
I didn't think I was going to be an actor, but I enjoy learning it. Learning it and look forward to it.
Go learn your lines, Herman. Go learn your lines.
So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us another week of Crew Justice Empowered by Witness the Innocent, hosted by Herman Lindsey. I want to thank my staff for the outstanding job. And as usual, I always like to send a commend to them that they're working extra hard and things like that in the office, well, at home. They're working from home, but they're working outstanding. I want to thank the ED, Kurt Bloodworth, and the chairman of the board, the co-chairman, Elizabeth Zachary. And I want to thank everybody else on the board for allowing us to do this show every week. But I also have to let you know that, you know, this stuff isn't free. So, you know, if you have a couple of coins to donate, look on witnesstheinnocent.org and donate. Give us a little support. I also want to say, you know, if you got a place or that you want to bring a death row exoneree into a meeting or a forum or anything, please contact us at Witness the Innocent, because our organization is based on death row exonerees from across the world. It's not just me. It's a lot of stories just like me. Some worse, some better, you know, but all of us share the same common thing, that we was a victim of miscarriage of justice. And we try to fight with a passion to educate people around the world. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone, and I want to say so long from Cruel Justice, empowered by Witness Innocent, and hope to see you next week. It's every week at every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Please share my videos on your Facebook pages. Tell your friend. This is our way of trying to educate people about things that's going on, what they can do, and I thank everyone. So long.